Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 4 of the KMC annual symposium on peer mediation. I'm super excited about today, peer mediation at school and beyond. We have an incredible panel, which Shally will introduce shortly, to talk about peer mediators and what they learn being a peer mediator in conflict resolution, and how those experiences have helped them not only in school, but also the experiences that they bring home. And actually, they continue throughout their life after they're out of school. So it's a super exciting panel today. My name is Sawyer. I'm the Vice President of KMC. If you have any questions or need some information, feel free to reach out to me during the course of the webinar or after. I'd like to introduce the President of KMC, Ms. Patchen, and she will introduce our fantastic panel today.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you in advance to all of our panelists. We, as Anne said, we're super excited about our group today, who have a lot of experience in these programs, and they're going to be sharing their information with you. And so if you have questions, please type them in the chat window. We'll probably wait until the end to go through all of those. But yeah, we want to leave everybody adequate time to ask questions. But we're excited to have you with us today. And so without further ado, I would like to go ahead and introduce our panelists for today. So 1 second here. All right, here we go. So Alexis Mele is the school counselor at South Hills High School in West Covina. And she is originally from Philadelphia, and she earned her bachelor's in psychology at Indiana University of PA and her master's in counseling at Rider's University. She started off as an elementary school counselor and is now in her 4th year at South Hills High School. Her school is one of the recipients of the KMC grant that we gave last year to reinvigorate their peer mediation program. And Alexis has created South Hills Wellness Center with peer counseling and wellness model, where students are trained in mediation, active listening, and basic counseling skills to help support students in need of intervention throughout the school days. So we're excited to have Alexis with us today. And then Rama Kadri is an English 9 and AP literature teacher, as well as the advisor to the 18 student leaders who take part in the peer mediation program at South Hills High School. And they are one of our partners that we've worked with for many, many years. Rama is originally from the Midwest and was a peer mediator herself in high school. She entered her bachelor's degree in English French secondary education from Michigan State University before moving to California. Soon after moving to South Pasadena, she was asked by the student founder of the South Pasadena High School Peer Mediation Program, Will Holdley-Brill, who you all will get to see tomorrow, to continue to develop and expand the program following his graduation. She has had the pleasure of helping to facilitate the largely student-run and led peer mediation program for the past 2 years and is truly grateful for being able to do so. And then Heather Schon. Heather is at Palisades High School and has been a guidance counselor at Palisades Charter High School for 16 years, where she founded and coordinates the peer mediation and counsel program on campus. Heather earned a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from Long Beach State, a Master of Arts in Counseling from LMU, and a Master of Arts in Negotiation, Conflict Resolution, and Peace Building from Dominguez Hills. She considers the peer mediation program at Pali her greatest accomplishment. And finally, Karen Crowley-Marks. Karen recently retired as the Dean of Students at University High School in Los Angeles and the coordinator of the peer mediation program there. She started the program in 2007, and it trains approximately 35 students each year. In 2015, she was given the Educational Leadership Award by the Asian Pacific American Dispute Resolution Center in Los Angeles for her work with student mediators. Dean Crowley-Marks explained, "The peer mediation program has made such a positive difference at University High School. Kids talk to each other, understand differences, and it has greatly reduced their suspension rate. The mediators have learned lifelong skills that they're utilizing in their lives long after high school." And Dean Crowley received her BA from the College of St. Rose in Albany, New York. So welcome to all of our amazing panelists today. And I'm gonna turn this over to Heather Schon to talk about their program and so forth. So Heather, take it away.
Thanks, Sally. So I don't know, many years ago, I was sitting in a active shooter drill and I was saying, why don't we try to reduce conflict instead of worrying about what happens when people are shooting? So I was part of peer mediation when I was at high school, at the same high school at Palisades. And the person who was in charge, Mr. Kitagawa, was amazing. And he had peer mediation, he had peer counsel, and I was involved, and it was wonderful. So I decided I wanted to bring it back, and it's been the best thing I ever have done. I've been at the school for 16 years, and it was starting to get, monotonous what I do all the time, and this is something that made me fall in love with my job again. So I really enjoy it. The students are inspiring. We've been doing counsel for about 10 years, so we've been doing different kinds of restorative practices, but this has been really remarkable. It really has shown me, it just really works. It reduces conflict on campus. It reduces, the students become better. So I really, really love everything about it.
Great. All right. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat window. All right. Let's go over to Karen Crowley-Marks.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I went to University High School as a math teacher in '94, and I was also a part-time dean. Then later on in 2013, I became the full-time dean. But in the end of 6, right before 7, the principal asked me to start a peer mediation program. And there were only 8 kids. We weren't really sure what that was. We researched it, went to another school, LeConte Middle School, to observe their program. And before you know it, we started a program, like Sally said, we have about 30 to 35 new students a year. It went for 11 years, 11 and a half. And then I was also the full-time dean. So I was the dean and the peer mediator coordinator, which was interesting because if a student got in trouble, they could come to mediation and try to work it out with my students and myself as just an advisor. But if they couldn't work it out, they had to leave and go see the dean, and that was me. So it was kind of 2 different scenarios. The students did an amazing job. We called them ambassadors of peace. They wore a lanyard that said University High Peer Mediator, so the students would get to recognize who they are. The program really took off when students would come into my math class, interrupt and say, I really need a mediation right now. And I'd be like, okay, just can you wait till after? It used to be a pullout. I would have a whole class, but then we became, we used to have a period for peer mediation every day, and then we made it a pullout. So kids would start referring, I'm worried about my friend, or we're not getting along, can I have a mediation? They'd self-mediate. Teachers would send in referrals saying, I'm noticing a problem. if this student could be mediated, or two students. And I even had teachers say, I'm having an issue with a student and I'd like to have a peer mediation. So they were student, teacher. And sometimes every time we had a new student come into uni, we'd do a mediation for them. And it wasn't that there was a problem, it was to welcome them, show them the campus, make them feel more comfortable, and then introduce them to the mediators. Overall, like Sally said, the suspension rate went down. It was great. People were really comfortable. Sometimes they'd want to have a mediation during math class like 3 times a week. And so we got wise to that because they need to stay in math. But it's excellent. My mediators, some of them, I mean, they graduated in 2007. So what is that? They're probably in their 30s now, and I still keep in touch, and they do use the skills with at college or in life. They said, I think one of the best parts of being a mediator is you become an active listener, and the kids learn to really listen before they speak. And then another good thing is learning to not judge and be neutral and talk to the students without giving advice. Sometimes they want to tell them what to do, and so you have to stop. But overall, it was the best part of my day. And I still go in, even though I retired. When the is absent, I go in and cover for her. I love it. And that's kind of about it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. All right. So let's go ahead and hear from Alexis Mele. And Alexis, as I said, is one of our grant recipients for this past year, and we're excited to have her with us today.
Thank you, Sally. I just wanted to say in advance, I have a new puppy behind me. So if you hear any squeaks or barks, that's him. So he's being quite calm right now. So my fingers are crossed. But thank you so much, Sally. My name's Alexis Mele. I work at South Hills High School. As she mentioned, originally I come from the East Coast. So I was an elementary school counselor for 4 years, and I'm now on my 4th year here in California. So 8 years total. Coming to South Hills, I am a school counselor, so I do not teach the peer mediation class, but we've had a peer mediation program at our school since the 90s. So when I came, I really didn't know much about the program, and I discovered the Kids Managing Conflict Symposium, and I attended, and that's where a light bulb came up, and I'm like, we have to do something. So our program was a bit dated. It still kind of is. We're working on it. But the biggest change that we're doing at our school is we're moving to a peer mediation, peer counseling model. And I am part of the team that is creating a wellness center on our campus. So the wellness center is a place that it was put on hold because of the COVID crisis, but hopefully this coming school year, all will go back to normal. The Wellness Center is meant to be a place for our peer counselors, peer mediators to use to work with students. So the Wellness Center, as I mentioned, is we focus on 6 dimensions of wellness. So focusing on not just the situation at hand, but overall wellness. So are students getting sleep? Are they nutritionally well? Are they spiritually well? Are they, all of those things? And I can go into any detail if anyone has questions. But at the same time, being able to use those peer mediation skills that we've used for the past so many years. The grant that we received, again, those things have been put on hold because of the crisis, but we're really excited to be able to grow the program. Our teacher has a lot of experience. He's been a part of peer mediation for years. But yeah, we notice on our campus, the biggest reason when I first came to South Hills, there's a huge need for just a place for students to go if they're struggling. As everyone probably knows, mental health is huge. I'm a huge mental health advocate for my students, and I know that we all probably are. I think it's huge that we find a space for students to go and be able to talk it through on our campus. So that's a big reason why the Wellness Center is coming up. So we're really excited about that. Another thing that we notice on our campus with our students is those who do use our peer mediators, they find it that it's so great to have a connection student to student, because they can talk to us as school counselors or teachers or staff, but being able to have somebody face-to-face who actually is going through or could have gone through what they're going through. It seems to be the students who do use our peer mediators have shared that it's much more comfortable, and they find it to be a really great experience. So I haven't been able to see, I don't have much data, which we're going to be continuing to collect, but we're really excited to see things change on our campus. And yeah, so that's about it. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for joining us today. And finally, Rama Kadri from South Pasadena High School, who we have partnered with for many, many years. I think ever since the beginning of this program, we gave them a grant to buy a divider so that they had a place to do peer mediation. So we've been with them and working with them for a long time. So Rama, welcome.
Thank you so much, and I'm so happy to be here. I'm grateful to be speaking alongside all of these panelists, and I want to say, so as was mentioned in my bio, I was a peer mediator at my own high school in Michigan, Plymouth High School in Michigan, and it was called mentorship and mediation. So we had both as part of the program. So we used to call it, we nicknamed it M&M. And from, I think, really that experience, I knew that I wanted to go into either education or counseling, and it really inspired me to pave the path that I did and to pursue the career that I ultimately did. My teacher in M&M, her name was Miss Kulzicki. We used to call her Miss K. And so I became, in a way, kind of like the new Miss K. And that was honestly, like, I couldn't have asked for anything better. My dream was to be an English teacher, but also somehow take part in peer mediation if that existed at the high school or whatever school I ended up at. And that came to be. So I moved to South Pasadena actually 3 years ago, and it originally was led, and I really still feel it is led by students, and we really facilitate that. And our students at South Pasadena High School have a reputation for being really, really strong leaders and individuals who carry that on after high school. So as was mentioned already, I had a senior in my AP Literature class named Will Hoadley Brill, who really still is has made a name for himself at our high school and beyond. He started the peer mediation program when he was in middle school at South Pasadena Middle School, and then carried it on in high school and made sure that it expanded and grew. And then two of our counselors actually at the high school, both Tracy Ishimaru and Nan Ng, were originally the leaders, staff leaders of the peer mediation program. They both wanted to take a little bit of a step back. And so Will reached out to me because as part of my English curriculum, I really like to make sure that mental health is addressed, is talked about. I feel like it's so often left out of the classroom. And I think just as a result of those types of conversations, he was graduating, he was leaving. And I don't want to say pass the baton to me, because again, really the kids are at the forefront at our high school. But I felt really honored to have the opportunity to kind of take on the lead from both of our counselors and be kind of the new teacher, leader, or facilitator of the peer mediation program. And our peer mediation program is slowly growing. I think when I first started, it was around 13, 14 kids, and now we're up to 18. So it's rising in numbers, and we're really excited about that. And besides mediation, which we very much want to advocate for, and we've also trained our students in peer support, our students really, really, really love, as Alexis also mentioned, talking about and really trying to address the taboo surrounding mental health. And so they lead a lot of stress relief workshops. We've had reading days in my classroom. There's something called Yoga with Yarrow, another English teacher and friend leads, and she's actually leading it today at 12:30, a virtual Yoga with Yarrow session. We have another teacher who leads mediation, or sorry, not mediations, but meditations. So they do different stress relief workshops, and they also expand them once each semester to have what they call Wellness Week. So it will be multiple stress relief workshops going on in the same week, usually 1 to 2 per day. normally around lunch or sometimes after school as well. So our kids really do their part to try to make sure that they're resolving conflict on campus, but also really paving a way for, again, mental wellness and mental health to be addressed and acknowledged, because especially in a highly competitive school, and really in all schools, it's so essential for kids to know that balance is important. It's okay, excuse me, it's okay for us to take a step back and reflect and think about what we need, self-care and having time for ourselves, and not just, in our school situation, overly obsessing about academics and what's to come in the future. So really our kids are learning all of that, trying to be leaders in that, and really try to change the school culture in a big way. And so I'm really glad to be a part of that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I have a question for Heather. Heather, you had said that, you had started, that there was, the active shooter program, and you had to like figure out how to address those things, and but you all decided that maybe it should just be a different conversation about how to get ahead of it, so you never have to address that. So can you talk about that a little bit more, and what you kind of put together for that program? We can't hear you.
We did a lot of things.
There you go.
One thing is to identify the students that are struggling. So we increase the mental health support on our campus, but also the mediation, the council, we tried to make it like talk to all the teachers. If there's any kind of issue in class with students, it's sent to us. The dean sent everything to us first to look at, see if we can resolve it with restorative practices, and we always do. So that's helpful. If we don't have conflict, it might not get to the point where people want to hurt each other. So we have prevented most fights on campus, that we know, everything that we know about, that is. So the students, like everyone said, the students are much more happy to talk to other students. Like when I used to try to do mediations with students, it would take an hour and a half, 2 hours, because it took a while for them to open up and like realize that I'm not trying to bust them for anything. I'm trying to actually help. But when they're sitting with other students, they're immediately willing to jump in and talk. And we usually find out a lot of stuff that we need to help, a lot of home issues, and stuff comes up that we can intervene in. So it helps us to know our students, to address some of the issues that they need help with. And it reduces overall behavioral issues on campus. And the students that have gone through mediation have way less referrals to the dean in the future. They learn how to resolve conflict for future events. So that's helpful too.
Right.
I did do a lot of data, because I presented the idea of this. We added a restorative practices class, and I did a bunch of data. I collected data on all our mediations and found that students who went through the process reduced their suspensions, reduced their expulsions, and they had way less referrals to the dean. So it became a more peaceful place.
Great. So it's had a long-term effect, not just for the students themselves, but on the school.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen that at my school. And then when I was doing research for my master's in conflict resolution, it's overall in the research, they found improved relationships, even better learning skills, better English language arts scores, better attitudes, more peaceful home life. So students who go through conflict resolution training have really good benefits beyond the mediation.
Yeah. Can you talk about the makeup of the school? Like,
At our school?
Yeah.
So we have 3,000 students. They are from 110 zip codes all over Los Angeles. So it's an interesting place. We have the local students. It's in Pacific Palisades, so it's a wealthy community. But we have students that are celebrities students, and then we also have people that are on welfare and free and reduced lunch. So we have all kinds of students. We have the ethnic makeup of the school kind of reflects the city. It's interesting. It's a neat place. We have all kinds of students, and figuring out how to have them all get along is always been a challenge, but this is really a wonderful way to do it.
Great. Good. So Karen, I've heard you speak many times about the program and getting it started and so forth, and maybe all of you can address this, but there's obviously a resistance to when a peer mediation needs to take place, but maybe teachers aren't exactly thrilled with the idea of allowing students to be released from class. So can you talk a little bit, Karen, can you talk a little bit about how you address that, and anybody else that would like to talk about that as well?
Yes, thank you. Because I was at that school from like 92 till last year, I had such a rapport with the teachers that when the mediators are chosen, they have to have a form given to their teachers explaining, I'm a mediator, I might miss class, and I will make up all the work. So the mediators were okay. And then they would, I would get a list of what periods are good for you to be pulled from. So if there's a conflict period 3, I would look at my list and say, you know, okay, who can I call? The teachers were pretty good about that. Sometimes if the teacher would say, you know what, they're having a test, can I send them when they're done? They would work with it. So yeah, I was lucky in that the teachers were real supportive, because I think it was a support system for them too. They could, if someone was really disrupting their class, rather than send them to the dean where it goes on your record, they would just say, I'm going to send you to peer mediation. So I didn't have that problem that often. Every now and then a teacher would say, look, it's just not a good day. Can we do it tomorrow? And we'd work with that. Unless it was a critical thing that's going to go down at lunch and we need to, then I would just say that and they would send them right down. Mm-hmm. So I think the advisor having a rapport with the staff is really important, because they'll support you. And so to build that up, plus the mediators were so responsible. They would always make up their work. It was more for a disputant who needed to get out of class. And to be honest, there were times, you know, the teacher would say, absolutely, keep them as long as you want. I mean, if there's a problem. So it worked that way.
And to add to that, I found that like when students come back and they're more well-behaved, the teachers find it's worth it. After a couple of years of seeing that, it helps the kids be more focused, and, you know, they're distracted if they have a conflict and they're not paying attention. And if they can get it resolved and get back to class right away without getting suspended, it makes a huge difference. So teachers start getting more supportive as it becomes successful.
Yeah, I think teacher buy-in is huge, and I've been working to do a lot of like professional development for teachers on just mental health and trauma, and realizing, like Heather said, that if students are struggling with something, they're not going to be able to sit in your classroom and learn algebra. So being able to have them understand, so whether it's like, I literally do 10 minutes or 15 minutes of a quick presentation, or send out an article or something, so teachers understand what this means and what kind of work these students are doing. But yeah, I think the teacher buy-in is huge. I think teachers need to understand what the program is. So a lot of times, and that's what I noticed when I first started, teachers were like, I don't know what these kids are doing. So I've spent the past 4 years educating the teachers on what this program is and what these kids are actually doing, by actually pulling the kids into staff meetings and talking about their experience, having them present, because they hear me talk all the time. So actually having kids come in and talk is very meaningful, especially when teachers can say, oh wow, that kid's in my class and I had no idea that they're doing this kind of work. So that's always helpful.
I'll build on that just a little bit as well. I think also knowing, again, I'm a member of the staff, I'm a teacher too, so knowing like what teachers are a little bit more comfortable with us pulling mediators out of class or a disputant out of class is helpful, or just giving them a heads up. Obviously teachers respect and appreciate that. And building on Alexis's point, I've had kids come in to staff meetings and lead discussions with teachers. And I think one of the most effective ways that we were able to communicate really what mediation is in general was last year, our students actually led a mock mediation during a staff meeting. And we had one mediator who was kind of on the side, who was explaining as they were leading the mediation. We would like pause and they would say, okay, this is what we're doing. These are the steps that we've gone through. So it was a way to really illustrate that the kids truly have comprehensive training in this, and this is a structured way to resolve conflict. I felt made a huge difference, and we had a significant increase in just the number of teachers who felt comfortable referring students to a mediation after they saw that in practice and right in front of them. So that made a really, really big difference. And if your kids don't feel comfortable leading a mock mediation, exactly what Alexis said, like having them even just come and speak to teachers in large group or small group, whatever is more comfortable for your school environment, I think makes a huge difference.
I think PR is really important. We used to, at the beginning of the year, we'd have assemblies to welcome kids back to school, and all the stakeholders would speak, the administrators, the leadership, and the peer mediators would go speak and introduce themselves and say, this is what we do. You don't have to get in trouble. Anyone that wears this lanyard, we're happy to help. So they kind of put themselves out there. And then they would, periodically, I would have small, like 2 of them go to each homeroom and with a little script about what's peer mediation, if you need anything. So it became more well-known, like through things like that.
Yeah, so that would be my next question. So you talked about how you get buy-in from teachers and administration, but how do you get the students to feel comfortable enough to, you know, want to come in and get a mediation, or to, you know, say that they've got, you know, an issue that they'd like to have addressed? Anybody?
Well, at our school, I mean, do you want to get in trouble and go to the dean and then have your parents called, and it'll go in your record on MySys where everyone can see? Or would you like to talk to students who have been through things that you've gone through? And then it's totally private. It doesn't go on the record. All I would put in MySys is peer mediation was had as an action. So that was like a much better option for them, because they don't want to get in trouble and then not be eligible, go to homecoming or, you know, school events if they have a discipline record.
Yeah, ours is also, the deans generally refer, and it's like they have a choice of trying peer mediation or having some kind of consequence, and they never end up with the consequence. What I will say is, like, once they've gone through a mediation process and realize how effective it is, the students will self-refer. But I don't have a lot of students self-referring before that, unless they have a friend that tells them about it.
Right.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think just also like having students really kind of form a presence on campus and make sure that they're like other students are aware of what peer mediation is. I will say at our school, that's a work in progress. Most of our referrals do come from other teachers, but I really think the biggest impact for our school in terms of kids gaining awareness of what peer mediation is and who the peer mediators are. Same thing with students going into, we have 9th grade study halls. So this year we had in each study hall 2 to 3 mediators working at a time, introducing themselves, introducing what peer mediation was to all of the freshmen in our high school. We also, again, as I've mentioned, we lead different lunchtime stress relief workshops and things of that nature. So having kids be pulled into working with the mediators and kind of seeing them face to face, introducing each other, I think also makes a big difference, because then they feel just more comfortable coming to those individuals with a concern that they might have. So just doing things outside of conflict resolution as well, I think makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
I'll jump in quick. This is one of the pieces that we're definitely, is definitely a work in progress for us at my campus, more of having the students understand what the students are, what the work that they're doing. So I agree and that's something that we're working on for this coming school year, using our link crew. So we have a link crew where students will, incoming 9th grade students will do orientation, and we're going to be having our peer mediators, the ones who've been involved for the most time. The most experienced ones go in and share a little bit about what they do and how they can use them on campus. So I think taking advantage of things that are already going on, whether it be orientation, if you have study skills, if you have study hall, if you have, we don't have either of those. We have just freshman English. So we're going to be pushing into the freshman English classes since all freshmen have English, just to take a few minutes out of the beginning of the school year to talk about it. So that's something that we're working on, but I think important also.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So we do have a question, and I just want to make sure that I understand this, but it's from Vincent Zarn, and Vincent says, hi panelists, should the person/group facilitating the peer mediators be teachers first?
Hi, Vince. Vince and I were just in the same cohort for the conflict resolution program. So we just went through the trenches together.
That's great.
I have to say, you just need somebody that's really passionate, that's going to be consistent on campus. It doesn't have to be a teacher. It's good to have a good relationship with the teachers, but I've never been a teacher. I'm a counselor, and just anyone can really do this. It could be, somebody in an office. They just need to be passionate about it and want to sustain it. A champion for the program is all you need.
At our school, I don't know if it's different because you're an independent charter. I agree with you. It doesn't need to be a teacher, like someone who understands, who cares, who's compassionate, who the kids trust. But in our school, they do have to be certificated.
Oh, okay.
Because when we take them on trips or we go off of campus, it has to be a certificated person. So it could be a counselor, teacher, an admin. As far as an office person, they're classified. So it would be hard for trips and things like that.
Yeah, what I think is important is having a team. And I know that might be really hard for some school sites, but we have an actual class. So we have a class where students are actually taking a peer counseling, peer mediation course to get credit. So our teacher is the facilitator, and then I'm part of the team where I am pushing in and helping with more of the behind the scenes work. And really coordinating a lot of things, especially with us creating the new wellness center. I've been the coordinator for that. But I think anyone who is a champion for mental health, anyone who's a champion for advocating for students, we are adding a teacher onto our team this coming school year, and she's the teacher who students go to. So we really took some time to find that teacher, and she's a teacher who, students confide in, students trust. So finding somebody, but I don't think they necessarily have to be a teacher. As a counselor, I think if you don't have somebody who needs to be teaching the class, this is more of like a program that students are used for pull out or push in. I think it can be really anyone who, is willing to commit to the program. And I think that's a huge piece too. You want to make sure it's somebody who wants to be involved, because it's, there's a lot that goes into it, as I'm learning. So somebody who's willing to do the work, but somebody who's passionate about it.
Yeah.
And it's helpful to have a team, because at the beginning I was doing this by myself, and it started getting popular, and I was missing a lot of my own work to sit in and supervise the mediations. So I wasn't doing a lot of PR because of that. And then I trained 3 or 4 other adults, and now I can have them jump in if I need to, and if I have an IEP or if I have something else I need to be doing.
That's great. Yeah. I think that there's, several different ways of doing it. We gave a grant a couple of years ago to the Santa Monica Alternative Schoolhouse, and it was actually a parent that wanted the program on campus. And so she was the one that started it there, and they did an awesome job getting the program set up and moving forward. So that works as well. I think you're right. It just has to be somebody that's got a passion for it. And I mean, obviously there has to be someone who can, be there and take care of it. But yeah, there's ways to get these programs started as well. All right, we've got another question. Have you all had to get creative to get buy-in from students that by instinct may avoid conflict? Anybody want to jump in on that one? So I think they're like, how do you get the students who avoid conflict or just don't even want to deal with it? How do you get them? I think, you know, Karen, you may have mentioned this before. It's kind of like, well, do you want to have to go to the dean? Do you want to, you
There's
know,
an incentive not to get in trouble. So if they're, you know, if they're not going to be, the parents aren't going to be called. So I usually pull the students aside one at a time and talk to them about what the process is going to be. And if they have any resistance, I just, you know, point out the alternatives. I don't like to use it as, you know, a deterrent to getting in trouble, but it's just the nature of how it works. But so that's always a good incentive to try.
Right.
The students that are really resistant, I usually just kind of give them some skills, you know, use I statements and don't attack and things like that before we get into it. Just a little less of conflict.
Yeah, so you're talking about disputants that might be unwilling to come to mediation.
yeah.
Same as Heather, we talk to them. The kids will say, look, just try. If you don't like it, if you're uncomfortable, we can stop it, but we're trying to help you from not letting this grow into something bigger. And when they know everything in there is confidential, like that can't be discussed outside, they sign a paper that states that, they feel more safe. And like you said, when they're talking with other students, because I'm in every mediation, but I don't participate. I'm, you know, pretending I'm writing notes, but I'm really listening all the time. And if they need me, I might make a suggestion, but they're comfortable with their peers. So I've had kids that are a little uncomfortable, but once they come in, gradually they open up, because the mediators are so skilled at bringing out their issues and not judging. So sometimes you have to coerce them a little, but just step in the door and let's try. And then once they stay.
Yeah, so you all, or at least there is an adult always somewhere in the room, so that if there something does arise, you can address it.
Yeah, it's good to have an adult in the room. What I would do, because I was the dean and the mediation room was right attached to the dean's office, like in a separate area. If something came up and I had to leave, I have a colleague who runs Beyond the Bell at our school, and she would come in and sit in and take over for me, because we always had to have someone there.
Yeah. Rama, what about you? How do you guys?
I would say the biggest thing in terms of if kids are reluctant, I think the conversation ahead of time and having kids just gain an understanding of what mediation is really helpful. I don't know that we've had kids that have been outwardly and very adamantly resistant to conflict, but I think really just, again, kind of gaining that presence with students, making sure that the school culture and the students themselves are aware of who the peer mediators are, I think plays a pretty central role in all of this. I don't think we've had anyone that I can think of in recent years that has been very, very against taking part in a mediation. But I think, again, I really think that just having the conversation ahead of time and really kind of laying the groundwork of this is what a mediation is. As Karen mentioned, like this is a contract, everything that is said here stays here, except if, for example, for any reason, something comes up where you're going to harm yourself, you're going to harm others, just the aspect of being a mandated reporter. I think kids respond really well to that. And they like the idea of peer-to-peer interaction and working to resolve something rather than having to face, you know, the vice principal of our school and potentially have their parents come in. I think that in and of itself is a little bit of a deterrent, but it is helpful, I think, and it makes a really big difference. The kids are at the forefront of all of this.
Great. Okay, so we have a question from Maria. I think it's Mansour. not sure how to say your last name, Maria, sorry. Her question is, what would you say is the first step into building a peer mediation program in school? And besides a passionate team, what does it take to maintain it? And, you know, I think that's a great question because, I mean, in the years that we've been working with schools, we do, you know, we know that a lot of schools have lost their programs. So what do you all do to try and help maintain your programs so that you don't lose it?
I think one of the biggest, I've made a packet of how to successfully start a peer mediation program. And I think one of the biggest parts is administrative buy-in. If your principal believes in it, they're gonna, Mr. Davidson was the principal at uni, and somehow he came up with the money every year to fund the training. I remember one day he said, you know, I'm pulling you out of a math class. Why don't we just have peer mediation at lunch so you can have your 5 math classes? And I said, that's a big bowl of not going to happen because kids are not going to give up their lunch to come up and mediate. It doesn't work. And luckily he agreed. But if you have a principal, an admin team that backs this up, and he was so proud of it because we were, before Pali, the only high school on the west side that even had a peer mediation program. So that's like a feather in the administrator's cap to go say, well, we have this program and our suspension rate is dropped. So for me, the most important was, will they support the program?
I agree. I think admin buy-in is huge. Having admin on your side. And I agree with Karen, being able to say that your school has a decent or good program. That's a great PR piece. And I also think the buy-in with students, right? You have to have students who are willing to be a part of the program. So I would say to maintain it, just making it something meaningful. And that's something we're really working on at our school. We have a lot of students in our program, but we really want to make it meaningful, make sure that there's something purposeful happening. So I would say buy-in for sure from admin. So if that means, you know, sitting down at an admin meeting or honestly starting with counselors. We're huge advocates, obviously, for mental health. We're trained in it professionally. So I think even sitting down with counselors and saying, hey, what do you think about this type of program? I guarantee you there's at least 1 or 2 of your counselors who'd be willing to help out. I'm being very hopeful in that. But I know as a counselor, we want to, and that it helps us too as counselors, because sometimes a lot of those conversations come to us and we have a lot on our plate. With all other things that we do at school. So maybe finding a counselor that can help, and then that can bridge the conversation with admin.
I 100% will piggyback off of what everyone has said so far. Having administrative support, I think, is really essential. And I've actually last year at the Symposium and at the Peer Mediation Invitational, I invited one of our administrators to come with me and be a chaperone for our students, because I wanted him to also see kind of what other schools were doing and how we could also expand our own program. And I feel like that has made a really positive difference. He loves to take part in reaching out with the peer mediators. We're currently working with an anti-vaping group and thinking about the correlations between mental health and vaping, and how do we kind of bridge that gap and communicate that to our school community. And he was really like a big part of trying to make sure that the mediators were a part of that conversation. So having that buy-in is huge. I'll also say in LA, we have such a good opportunity with KMC. In Pasadena, we have the Western Justice Center. I attended an amazing conference and training 2 summers ago through the Western Justice Center called the ABCs of Conflict, and I cannot recommend it enough. It was truly like the way that I really gained a deeper understanding. And again, I was a peer mediator, but having that sort of training professionally is a completely different situation, right? Being a peer mediator is one thing, having an understanding of it is one thing, but then leading a program is entirely another. And so that training, I really feel like helped me to feel like I was well trained, I had confidence, I knew systematically and logistically how I was able to, in my case, I wasn't starting it, but maintaining it and expanding it a little bit further. And just got to have the kids, right? The kids are the ones that are at the center of this. Our school has, we send out recommendations each year to teachers of who they would recommend. We have a great middle school program. So one of our middle school teachers also sends the list of kids who are part of the peer mediation program at our middle school and tries to encourage them to continue on with it in high school. And this past year, we had a big group of kids from the middle school that decided that they wanted to continue with peer mediation in high school. So really making sure that the kids are invested, and we interview them. We have like an application process. We have a whole structure to make sure that the kids that are going to head into peer mediation are invested and are passionate. And I think that plays a really central part in this too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, that's great.
To jump in on that quickly, I agree that the kids, the first point you made, I was going to speak to about, kids wanting to be in the program and training. You had training from the Western Justice Center. It's an excellent program. Some of my friends did. I went to the APA DRC and had a 40-hour training where we actually did mediations that would go like 3 hours. These would be like landlord-tenant. So once you're on that side of it and you realize, and you get a lot of tools that they're really helpful. So we have a lot of support from KMC, from APA DRC, from Western Justice. What I wanted to ask you ladies quickly, what's your application process? I have an application, we put it out about 3 weeks before, we plaster signs all over the school. Do you have what it takes? Do you like to help others? And then we have them fill out an application. Then they come in for an interview, and the mediators from the year before who had to go through the same process will sit with me on a long table, and they get to ask the questions. I don't look for A students. The GPA isn't important to me as their work habits and cooperations. We had a student with all A's, but he had like 11 out of 12 U's. So I'm looking for people that have had experience, not only just I don't want to say the goody two shoes, but students that have gone through drama, that have come out on the right side and have gone a year without getting in trouble. They bring a lot to support the other kids. So I was just wondering, what's your application process? Sometimes a teacher will recommend, but I also like the kids to come forward and they want to do this. It's good for them. They learn a lot. It's great for their college apps. And so they buy into it too. Mm-hmm. What do you guys do?
Similar, we have a Google form where teachers can recommend, and it populates a spreadsheet. We also have current mediators recommending other younger students. And then we do the same. We try to balance it out with, boys and girls and different ethnicities, and we get a teacher recommendation, and then we interview them. And we also have a peer day where all the different leadership groups come and the students can sign up. And so I vet them out too. And then we narrow it down, and we train 30 students a year. I agree with the admin buy-in. That's a really big point. Maria asked how to get the admin buy-in. And for me, I think data is the best way to get admin buy-in. So if you can show them that other schools have reduced suspensions, expulsions, reduced conflict on campus, and have, better students, you're going to get buy-in. So I think that's the best way to do it. And then as far as setting up the program, the steps are kind of, get the buy-in, get the funding, have one of these wonderful organizations come and train the students, and then you're ready to go. You just need to have the paperwork to use, like a contract to use in the mediation, and you have to be able to oversee and supervise and coach the students through the process. So that's kind of the step-by-step.
Yeah. So one of the other questions that we've had, we've got only a few more minutes here, and I want to get to this one because I think it's a really good one. So the question from Gina Dyson is, how do you ensure confidentiality among the peer mediators? And what do you do when you learn that someone has breached confidentiality? So who would like to jump in on that one?
Say something. I had that happen in like 12 years. I think it happened twice, where and the kids know the only way we can talk about it is if we are debriefing after mediation and we all want to talk about it, or at our weekly meetings we'll talk confidentially among the mediators. However, I had a couple mediators tell one student, for example, well, you know what, you're not going to get in. You didn't interview well.
You're done.
Yeah.
Oh.
And in the times where mediators have breached it, to be honest, I had to say, you're not in the program. I mean, every now and then I might, if someone did something, not by, breaching information, but something inappropriate for a mediator, because I hold them to this high bar, they'd be on probation for a month. But if they blatantly went out and talked about something confidential, sorry, it's not, you're done. It might seem harsh, but that's such a big part of our program. And without that, we won't have trust from students.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
I agree with her. We haven't ever had a problem with it. The training, the students are really encouraged, and they respect the process.
Yeah, I don't think we've had any issues from what I know. I've spoken to other schools that have programs and talked about that specifically, because as a counselor, that's a big deal to me. And typically they do the same as Karen. It's more of a probation or a sorry, you can't be a part of this program any longer. And I think that's what keeps students, to a certain bar, being able to understand that their role is really big. Mm-hmm. And something that I think is really important is just having serious training on confidentiality, understanding, what that means, what that looks like. Because if these are students who are truly passionate about being involved in the mental health field, wanting to be, a helper in some sort, in some capacity, being able to have them really understand what confidentiality means. I know as a teenager that's hard, especially with pressure, but I think a lot of it comes down to the training, being able to really train them on what confidentiality is. And I would say bring in counselors in for that. Mm-hmm.
And then reinstate it all year long, like
yes,
keep and coming back to it.
And it's a question in our interview process, and it's a question we ask the people who refer, like, do you have students that you think can maintain confidentiality? That's right. part of the criteria.
Yeah, that's we have a list of interview questions, and one of them is, do you have a problem with confidentiality, and is there any reason that you might break someone's secret? And the right answer is, I think you said, Rama, if you're going to hurt yourself or others, then we have to. But other than that, it stays in the room.
Yeah. All right. So any closing remarks, because we're right up against the 11 o'clock hour. So anything else that anybody wants to say before we sign off?
Well, we did have a few Q&A questions.
Yeah, we have some questions. I apologize.
Did I miss one?
In the Q&A, there's a chat in the Q&A. The Q&A has a couple. One of the questions is what kind of things are referred to mediation? That was one of the questions.
Okay.
And, it runs the gamut, but a lot of it is like miscommunications, or two friends get in a fight and can't figure out a way to resolve it, and then rumors start, and then gossip, and it gets worse and worse. Then there's students who want to have a fist fight. So we have all kinds of things that come to mediation. Anybody else?
I would say our biggest problems coming to mediation start with social media. Mm-hmm. Because they posted something, they made a comment, and we try to teach them what you put there stays in the universe. You can't take it back. So that escalates to another person approaching because what you wrote, and it can lead to a physical fight, like you said, Heather. But social media has been kind of a curse in high school.
I agree with both of them. From our model, more of a peer counseling model, we see a lot of students just coming by wanting to talk, wanting a space to talk about whether it's anxiety about a class or something going on at home. Again, not at a crisis level, because of course when it hits that crisis level, we get involved as counselors, but just wanting to just have a space. That's what we see. So aside from the idea of it being referred to the dean, a lot of the conversations that come up, we still deal with the fights and the social media and the social issues, but more of I'm having a rough day, I just need to talk to somebody.
Social media is, I would say, number one at our school in terms of peer mediation, conflicts that we work to resolve and to help students with. But again, as I mentioned earlier, our school also has, our students are trained in peer support. So again, a lot of what Alexis said as well. We have kids, especially at our school, talking about, I'm taking 4 to 5 AP classes. I'm not able to like find time for myself to sleep, to do things like that. And so our kids are trained in helping them to see what's important in taking care of themselves. I know a few teachers that do this. And as a teacher, anytime I have a new student come into our school, I also always refer them to peer support, just so that they're familiarized with the peer mediators and know that that's an available resource for them. And I think it just helps to kind of get them to be like, okay, I at least have one person or 2 people that I can reach out to, have some sense of support at the school as I'm coming in. So I like to do that as well. But yeah, I think a lot of what everyone has said, I've experienced too.
And so one last question here. What was one of the biggest challenging moments while working with peer mediation? A difficult time that made you question your work, but in the end, taught an important lesson?
I had one mediation that in the middle of it, the mediator broke the neutrality. Like, so they, somebody said, she recorded it, and she said, no, she didn't. And then the mediator said, yes, she did. I saw the video. So then it caused, all of a sudden it got really crazy in there. One of the girls went to jump across the table, wanted to like get in a fist fight right in the middle of the mediation. We called security. So then we had to sit and talk about how we were going to resolve it, because the mediation I didn't think was going to work again. So we pulled the 2 groups of girls in separate rooms and did circles with them, did restorative circles. And we talked it through and kind of talked about their goals and what they want their legacy to be. And they both groups didn't want to be thought of as like the mean girls. And so we got it resolved that way. Then they apologized to each other and it worked out. But that was a challenge, but it worked out.
Great. Karen.
I'd like to say, yeah, the hardest, usually we have 2 mediators, 2 disputants, so it's pretty compact. But I've had mediations where it was, let's say, the whole drill team, like 9 girls, and then I have a 1-to-1 correspondent. So for every mediator of a disputant, so I'd have a circle with 16 people, and it could go on for hours. Okay, one was like 3 hours, and it still wasn't resolved. So those are the kind that are really challenging. I try to stay away from big ones like that, because there's so much emotions and so many hormones flying around that it's almost impossible. We have to break into subgroups. So for the real big ones, those are days when I totally need an Excedrin.
Rama?
Comment that we are over the hour, but I do want to get through and finish. We have a couple more questions. I want to finish the comments. I think they're super important.
Yeah.
To leave, we will provide a recording after the fact, and obviously it's contact information. But let's go ahead and finish these questions, and then we're going to close it out.
Yeah.
I think a recent one that came to mind, I mentioned that our administration wants us to talk about and take part in the initiative for anti-vaping. And I had a couple of mediators who started making like little jokes and things about, oh, is this really all that necessary and all of that. And then I pulled them aside and had a conversation with them. And they were both upperclassmen boys. And I spoke to them and I said, you guys realize that like the way you're presenting yourself right now is impacting other mediators as part of this. And if you don't want to take part, you don't think that vaping is a serious issue on campus, we're going to have a serious conversation. And I think just pulling them aside allowed me to have that conversation. And we had an outside anti-vaping group come in and lead a presentation about the risks of vaping. And once they saw like just how significant of an issue it was like they realized, they came back to Jesus, if you will, and just kind of realized that they maybe were brushing something off or making light of something that really should not be made light of, and they felt a little more serious about it. And actually one of those students in a past meeting that we had just a few weeks ago spoke afterwards about how passionate he is now about making sure that kids don't feel like this is something silly or they should be goofing off about. And he was really the one, like our administration initially wanted to just talk about vaping. And he kind of pulled us in I think, a better direction in talking about, well, as peer mediators, we don't want to just like scare people into not smoking. We want to make sure that they know like some of the reasons that actually lead kids to want to vape, and that really has to do with mental health. And he was the one that led that conversation and really kind of bridged that gap that I felt was really very much there. So I was really proud of the fact that he stepped up in that instance. So I think also just remembering the mediators themselves, they're kids, but they sometimes need a little bit of restorative practice and just be pulled aside for a second and reminded of our objectives as peer mediators, and they can really kind of pull through as a result. So I saw a great example of that.
Great. How about Alexis?
So being that I'm somewhat new to the program and I'm not actually in the classroom with the students, I would say a challenging moment for me would be, you know, anytime a peer mediator or a peer counselor is dealing with a student who is struggling with either suicidal ideation or self-harm. I think as a counselor, myself as a counselor, those students, and as Rama just said, you know, these students are still kids and they're still dealing with their own issues. So I think the challenging part for me is when a peer mediator will come to the counseling office and say, this student needs to talk to you about XYZ. So then we take it over from that point. I think it's the moment where I question, is this okay, right? Are these kids okay? The actual students who are having those conversations. But at the end of the day, I always realize how resilient those kids are and how it gives them even more purpose to realize that, hey, you know, I just almost possibly saved a life. And I always make sure to have that conversation after I deal with the situation with those peer mediators and have a debrief with them to make sure that they know, you know, and help them process that, because that can be really heavy and hard on those students. That's always a challenging moment. And I think it's really important to notice that these kids are doing really great work and really important work as well. So I'd say challenging moment for sure, but always a good light at the end to be like, you know, we got the student the help that they needed. Because of you, they were able to have a safe place. So that's always challenging, but always a good reason to really pump us up to be like, we're doing good work.
Yes. Well, and really quickly, this is the last question, I swear. And just if any of you have done this. So this is from Emily Dixon, and it says, in the past years, peer mediators were on the playground when there was free time, walking around to see if there were any questions that could be resolved by peer mediation. Do any of your schools use this process?
So our peer mediators, we're called the Pally Peace Posse, and they wear lanyards with Pally Peace Posse on them. And they've had situations where people needed to resolve something, and they've come up to them on the quad. It's usually done through me, but they usually bring students to me. But they definitely have answered questions or helped resolve issues just on their own from the skills that they have.
Yeah, I have the same thing where, excuse me, sorry. Where students at nutrition and lunch, it's high school, they have their lanyards on. So they don't really go ask people, but people will come up to them and say, oh, you're a mediator. Can I sign up? Can I have a referral? So that exposure just makes it easy for them to be approached by kids.
Yeah, I think a huge piece is we're high school as well, so we don't have a playground, but the quad in general. So a lot of that free time during lunch or during break is when students will seek out the help, whether it be going to the classroom of the teacher who teaches peer mediation to be like, hey, I need to talk to somebody, or just by word of mouth. And I think having students on the forefront is a huge reason why it's successful, because these are the students that say, hey, I saw some stuff on social media, I think we should talk to these students, or I heard from my other friend that this kid is struggling with whatever it might be. So I think having them on the forefront of this team ultimately is one of the biggest benefits to having a peer mediation program, because us as adults, we don't know all of the situations going on. It's the students who are the ones that tell us most of the time. So if it's not a self-referral, it's usually from like, hey, I noticed somebody posted or did something. So that's always really beneficial for us.
Great. All right. Thank you all so very much for all of your time today, and you know, for participating with us. It's always great to have you with us. And just for information, Palisades High School is going to be our guest on June 10th for our celebration of peer mediation. Of course, we're going to be doing that virtually. And so Heather and her crew are going to be with us, and you'll see more information about that in the days and weeks to come. But thank you all again for being with us. And for everybody else, please jump on tomorrow for our final session with our peer mediators. So thank you all so much.
And thank you, Anne and Sarah, for putting the time into this and making it happen. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you for everyone who attended.
Thank you,
Yes.
everyone. It was so great.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.